you keep calling this the Chinese virus? There are reports of dozens of incidents of bias against Chinese Americans in this country. Your own aide, Secretary Azar, says he does not use this term. He says ethnicity does not cause the virus. Why do you keep using this? A lot of people say it's racist.
It's not racist at all, no, not at all. It comes from China. That's why. It comes from China. I want to be accurate.
About Chinese
Yeah,
Americans
please,
in
John,
this country?
please.
The aides behind you. Are you
I
comfortable
have
with this term?
I have great love for all of the people from our country, but as you know, China tried to say at one point, maybe they stopped now, that it was caused by American soldiers. That can't happen. It's not going to happen, not as long as I'm president. It comes from China.
All right, let's take the information we just heard and start our first episode. Welcome to the channel where information is everything. We're fighting a war where we fight something that we can no longer trace and cannot see. We must stay vigilant, keep sane, but more importantly, we need to share the truth with each other. Please keep in mind that all information gathered and exploited through this channel is strictly not my own, and this is all my own research. Now, let's talk about, was the coronavirus predicted? I'm going to take you through watching a scene of an episode of a TV show coming from Netflix. I'm going to let it play all the way through once, and then we're going to talk about the dialogue.
자세한 건 좀 더 조사를 해봐야겠지만 변종된 코로나 바이러스입니다.
코로나면 혹시 메르스?
메르스, 사스, 감기 모두 동일한 바이러스의 유전 정보를 지닌 패밀리로 보면 돼요. 코로나는 호흡기 질환을 일으키는 대표적인 바이러스고 2015년 메르스 사태 때 사망률이 20%가 넘었죠.
근데 20%는 무기로 쓰일 정도는 아니지 않나요?
아까도 말했다시피 이건 변종된 바이러스예요. 누군가 인위적으로 사망률을 90%에 육박하도록 올린 것으로 보입니다.
90%요?
그보다 더 심각한 건 코로나 바이러스는 평균 2일에서 14일의 잠복기를 거치지만 이건 노출된 후 단 5분 내에 폐를 직접적으로 공격하도록 인위적으로 변종을 했어요.
Alright, we're going to watch it again. This time I'm
자세한
going
건 좀
to
더
do
조사를 해봐야겠지만
subtitles
변종된
for you. So the lady is telling her we must do more research.
코로나 바이러스입니다.
It looks like a mutant coronavirus.
혹시
Corona, MERS, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, severe acute respiratory syndrome, the common flu. They all fall in the same family with the same gene information. The coronavirus attacks the respiratory system. During the 2015 MERS epidemic, the mortality rate was over 20%. But that's not serious enough to be used as a weapon, am I wrong? Says the other character. Like I said, this is a mutant virus. Someone tweaked it to increase the mortality rate to almost 90%. 90%? The surprised woman adds. What's more serious is that the coronavirus's incubation period is of 2 to 14 days, alluding to the spread being more serious than the virus. The virus was manipulated to attack the lungs directly. Manipulated as in man-made, within just 5 minutes of being exposed.
변종을 했어요.
We talk about how easily this virus spreads. We talk about how awful it really is. So let's take a look at the dialogue talking about the death toll actually being, the mortality rate being 90%. In the show, people saying on Twitter that it gave them goosebumps. Another person saying that was just gonna leave this here, but I am massively spooked. And the reason why they have goosebumps and are massively spooked is because they're feeling of deja vu, or of even reading and having done research themselves before ever knowing of that TV show, of this oddball TV show, My Secret Terrace, that somehow had correct information about the coronavirus that we are going through now. Correct as in the incubation period for this virus being specifically between 2 to 14 days. Specifically for it being something that attacks the lungs directly. And what's even more disturbing is that in the show, they're talking about it being used as a weapon. Now, this is a South Korean show. This did not come out of China. China would never release something like this, especially if they really were the culprits. But let's talk about this. Seeing as how China would never release something about that, they have silenced doctors and put doctors into isolation. The Chinese nationals, the government, the doctors were being put in isolation so that the word of the virus could not get out. Now, usually, if you have good intentions and you want to help human society, you would tell people that something is happening worldwide. But they gave the world 2 whole months, November, December, to even start nationally recognizing it as a problem. Something fishy there about that. So, let's talk about Bill Gates. What does this awful look like here? Sorry. Let's read about this. Coronavirus. Bill Gates predicted the pandemic in 2015. Microsoft co-founder warned us that in 1920s Spanish flu would spread very quickly. They're calling this a dangerous and relentless momentum that it spreads with. Many Americans, including political leaders, have been shocked over how the pandemic has shut down the world economy, stretched hospitals to the breaking point, and transformed everyday living. Question is here, is this a biological weapon? If anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus than a war, Gates said. Not missiles, not microbes. Let's go ahead and take a little look at what Bill Gates had said about this.
When I was a kid, the disaster we worried about most was a nuclear war. That's why we had a barrel like this down in our basement, filled with cans of food and water. When the nuclear attack came, we were supposed to go downstairs, hunker down, and eat out of that barrel. Today, the greatest risk of global catastrophe doesn't look like this. Instead, it looks like this.
All right, I'm going to stop it there just for a quick second. Mind you, that Bill Gates spoke about this in 2015, 4.5 years before the virus.
If anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus rather than a war. Not missiles, but microbes. Now, part of the reason for this is that we have invested a huge amount in nuclear deterrence, but we've actually invested very little in a system to stop an epidemic. We're not ready for the next epidemic. Let's look at Ebola. I'm sure all of you read about it in the newspaper. Lots of tough challenges. I followed it carefully through the case analysis tools we use to track polio eradication. And as you look at what went on, the problem wasn't that there was a system that didn't work well enough. The problem was that we didn't have a system at all. In fact, there are some pretty obvious key missing pieces. We didn't have a group of epidemiologists ready to go who would have gone, seen what the disease was, see how far it had spread. The case reports came in on paper. It was very delayed before they were put online, and they were extremely inaccurate. We didn't have a medical team ready to go. We didn't have a way of preparing people. Now, Médecins Sans Frontières did a great job orchestrating volunteers, but even so, we were far slower than we should have been getting the thousands of workers into these countries. And a large epidemic would require us to have hundreds of thousands of workers. There was no one there to look at treatment approaches, no one to look at the diagnostics, no one to figure out what tools should be used.
Let's be clear, he's talking about Ebola right now. It sounds like he's talking about coronavirus in today's time, but he's talking about a virus, the Ebola virus, that we actually, as a planet, did very well on containing, but we did not have the resources to help these people.
An example, we could have taken the blood of survivors, processed it, and put that plasma back in people to protect them.
He's talking about antibodies.
But that was never tried. So there was a lot that was missing, and these things are really a global failure. The WHO is funded to monitor epidemics, but not to do these things I talked about. Now in the movies, it's quite different. There's a group of handsome epidemiologists ready to go. They move in, they save the day, but that's just pure Hollywood. The failure to prepare could allow the next epidemic to be dramatically more devastating than Ebola. Let's look at the progression of Ebola over this year. About 10,000 people died, and nearly all were in the 3 West African countries. There's 3 reasons why it didn't spread more. The first is there was a lot of heroic work by the health workers. They found the people and they prevented more infections. The second is the nature of the virus. Ebola does not spread through the air. And by the time you're contagious, most people are so sick that they're bedridden. Third, it didn't get into many urban areas, and that was just luck. If it had gotten into a lot more urban areas, the case numbers would have been much larger. So next time, we might not be so lucky. You can have a virus.
He's saying next time we might not be so lucky, as if he has information on as there was. And I would suspect a man of Bill Gates' stature to have information more than anybody in the general public. I feel like maybe he was connected to doctors in Wuhan. I feel like maybe he had connections all around the globe talking about man-manipulated virus. as we saw in My Secret Terrorists.
where people feel well enough while they're infectious that they get on a plane or they go to a market.
And this is happening all too often now today. Where he's saying if people get on a plane, they go to a market, a lot of these viruses are spreading, or a lot of the coronavirus is being spread during the incubation period, the 2 to 14 days before symptoms actually show up.
The source of the virus could be a natural epidemic like Ebola, or it could be bioterrorism.
And there is the key warning. Bill Gates tried to warn us. He tried to warn the president. This is bioterrorism. Why do I call it bioterrorism? Because China silenced their doctors for 2 whole months before there would have been a chance to actually stop the spread. I don't know how in Africa Ebola was stopped before it killed more than 15,000 people across the globe, and how China, a first world, I'm being generous calling it a first world country, but a country of that stature, with so many people, I have no idea how they were so negligent and why they were so superficial. They didn't want this to look bad on them. So they even blamed America. As you saw Donald Trump say at the beginning of the video, that China tried to say that US soldiers brought this virus to be a bioterroristic attack against China. Why would we do that? Why would they say that? To save face. To make them not look like the people who are doing this.
And so there are things that would literally make things 1,000 times worse. In fact, let's look at a model of a virus spread through the air like the Spanish flu back in 1918. So here's what would happen. It would spread throughout the world very, very quickly. And you can see there's over 30 million people die from that epidemic. So this is a serious problem. We should be concerned. But in fact, we can build a really good response system. We have the benefits of all the science and technology that we talk about here. We've got cell phones to get information from the public and get information out to them. We have satellite maps where we can see where people are and where they're moving. We have advances in biology that should dramatically change the turnaround time to look at a pathogen and be able to make drugs and vaccines that fit for that pathogen.
Notice how he's saying that we have time to try and find drugs and vaccines for a pathogen. I think that China tried to eliminate that time for us to try and find a vaccine for a pathogen worldwide by keeping us out of the loop. By saying, oh no, we urge you not to panic, not to run wild. And yes, urging people not to panic actually helps in solving some areas of the problem. If everybody panicked and healthcare professionals panicked, we wouldn't be able to solve anything. But the problem is they tried to silence their doctors. They tried to silence those who were trying to help.
So we can have tools, but those tools need to be put into an overall global health system, and we need preparedness. The best lessons, I think, on
He mentions a global health system. Something that, as a planet, we probably could have taken a little bit more initiative, but we couldn't do it without the help of China, the source of the virus. The fact that they covered up that they were spreading the virus for 2 months is a death sentence. Not a death sentence for the officials of China, but a death sentence to its own people, a death sentence to people worldwide. And that makes me think officials in China have to answer for themselves. Was silencing the doctors who were saying, this is bad, this is a bad virus, this is going to kill people, it's going to kill millions. Is silencing those people really the right thing for them to have done? Should we in the future try and intervene with China trying to silence its own doctors, saying that they didn't want word of the virus to get out? I think that the officials in China need to answer for themselves. I think that they should be globally convicted and even sentenced to death, those who tried to silence the spread of the virus, because it's now taking more lives worldwide. And China's obviously lying about its death rate, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But we talked about coronavirus being predicted by TV shows, Bill Gates. We'll actually let Bill Gates finish this.
How to get prepared, or again, what we do for war. For soldiers, we have full-time waiting to go. We have reserves that can scale us up to large numbers. NATO has a mobile unit that can deploy very rapidly. NATO does a lot of war games to check, are people well trained? Do they understand about fuel and logistics and the same radio frequencies? So they are absolutely ready to go. So those are the kinds of things we need to deal with an epidemic. What are the key pieces? First is we need strong health systems in poor countries.
Strong health systems in poor countries they're useful. But I think more than just strong healthcare systems, we need an honest healthcare system. We need people telling the truth. And that's why social distancing didn't really start until, February? More like early March in the United States. Things were not taken as seriously as they should have been. And do we have ourselves to blame for that? I think some of us. Sure. But truthfully, I think that China did a very, very bad job of alerting the rest of the world in time. They let people fly in and out of the country. They let people on cruise ships. They prevented us from having any information on the inside by silencing its people and its doctors, all to save face.
Where mothers can give birth safely, kids can get all their vaccines, but also where we'll see the outbreak very early on. We need a medical reserve corps. Lots of people who've got the training and background who are ready to go with the expertise. And then we need to pair those medical people with the military, taking advantage of the military's ability to move fast, do logistics, and secure areas. We need to do simulations, germ games, not war games, so that we see where the holes are. The last time a germ game was done in the United States was back in 2001, and it didn't go so well. So far, the score is germs 1, people 0. Finally, we need lots of advanced R&D in areas of vaccines and diagnostics. There are some big breakthroughs, like the adeno-associated virus, that could work very, very quickly. Now, I don't have an exact budget for what this would cost, but I'm quite sure it's very modest compared to the potential harm. The World Bank estimates that if we have a worldwide flu epidemic, global wealth will go down by over $3 trillion, and we'd have millions and millions of deaths. These investments offer significant benefits beyond just being ready for the epidemic. The primary health care, the R&D, those things would reduce global health equity and make the world more just as well as more safe. So I think this should absolutely be a priority. There's no need to panic. We don't have to hoard cans of spaghetti or go down into the basement. But we need to get going because time is not on our side. In fact,
You get how he says, time is not on our side. As if. And look at his expression here. He seems very serious. And Bill Gates is a very important guy. So, what did Bill Gates know in 2015 with all of his global connections? What did he know? Because I can tell you right now, he probably did have a confidential source of information coming from China, who, if he was to have publicly said anything about it, he would have been put to death by his own government.
if there's one positive thing that can come out of the Ebola epidemic, it's that it can serve as an early warning, a wake-up call to get ready. If we start
Let's just appreciate how many times that he has tried in just this 8-minute segment in 2015 to warn people, to say, get ready. He says that we shouldn't go and hide in our basements, but we should work. Work to achieve something that he knows we are not ready for, which he knew somehow 4 years ago that an epidemic would be the next thing that humanity was faced with. Not just because he's a smart guy. Bill Gates is a smart guy. He's also a man with a lot of power, a man with a lot of connections, and a man with an immense amount of information. Is he withholding things in this statement? Said over 8 minutes? He makes it look like he's not withholding anything. He makes it look as if, he didn't expect this, but he expected it. But I can tell you one thing, as a man with this kind of stature would not warn the public, warn the world, if he didn't actually have some information. So, we talked about how coronavirus was predicted by TV shows, Bill Gates, and the accuracy of these things is phenomenal. Phenomenal, I say, in a infamous way. Because the evidence is adding up immensely. We talked about China's cover-up. 2 months of nothing but silencing its own people. And nobody says anything. Nobody says anything to China. They urge the rest of the world not to panic, that this will all go away. Trump says that too. Trump says that this will all go away. But Trump's old. Sometimes we gotta really wonder if Trump's trying to save face too. Because he was warned by Mr. Bill Gates in 2016, 2018, I think as well, that if we did not have a way to prevent an epidemic, it would mean bad things for the US, it would mean bad things for the world. He said that Trump looked interested whenever he discussed plans to prevent an epidemic with himself being Bill Gates, but just hasn't put forth the time or the resources. Now, let's uncover something else that's disturbing. We'll move away from the videos. Hold on, my computer is freezing. Okay. Let's move away from the videos. Okay. Let's refresh this. Coronavirus cases worldwide. 1.2 million. Deaths skyrocketing over the past 2 days. I think we've seen an increase in about 10,000 deaths. Now, if we take a look at the worldwide mortality rate, we can say obviously that this My Secret Terrorist and the fear coming out of this episode is not a 90% mortality rate, but more like the opposite. Let's also take into account a 55-year-old individual from Hubei province may have been the first person to have contracted the COVID-19 virus spreading across the globe, and the case dates back to November 17th, 2019. We're going to move back over here to the stats again. So, TV show says 90% mortality rate. Rest of the world, we have 45,000 people in serious or critical condition. We have 70,000 deaths almost. Well, we're going to have 70,000 before we know it. It's going to happen. Unfortunately, we have 1.2 million, and this number seems still small. We've been dealing with this virus for almost a full 180 days, almost a full half a year, and we've only seen 79% of closed cases make it out. That leaves us with 20% of all closed cases, a 1/5, 20% mortality rate right now. If we look at total cases, and this is growing exponentially, let's say January 23rd, reported cases around 1,000, January 23rd. That's where we hit that grim number. And as the days go on, say 7 days later, 10,000. 7 days from that day, a whopping 30,000. 7 days from then, it doubles again. Almost 70,000. 7 days from there, a small curve, a flattened curve right now. And then 2 weeks go by from whenever it was almost 70,000. And you have right around 100,000. Now this is where we see a jump, an insane jump. You want to know why? This is whenever we actually began testing globally and having the resources. As tests globally start to come out, we start to see a crazy rise. And the crazy rise starts about the beginning of almost mid-March. Every day we see that we're rising in about 10,000 cases. Or, yeah, let's be clear, about 10 to 20,000 cases a day. Here's a big jump from 18 to 44. So over 25,000 cases a day. Over 25,000 cases a day. Over 25,000 cases a day. Almost 40,000 cases in a day. Almost 40 there. And now we're starting to see it exponentially double in the amount of cases a day. 50,000. 50,000. 60,000. Almost 70,000. You see it go up about 60, 70,000 a day. And that's just how many tests that we can actually get done. All right, April 2nd. April 2nd, 1 million cases. April 3rd, 1,100,000 cases. That's 100,000 case jump. And then almost another 100,000 cases next day. So we're starting to see the number of cases rise in hundreds of thousands of cases a day. And that's just of the people being tested. Let's say that the R naught of the virus is somewhere around an average of 10 to 20 people, even when properly social distancing. Let's take that 1 million and turn it into 10 to 20 million cases that haven't been tested and probably aren't showing symptoms yet. Now, the US is doing a phenomenal job in being able to actually test people. We are still having a very hard time being able to find personal protection equipment, find testing equipment. If we could get at-home tests administered for all Americans, we could then track the virus. But there is almost no way of tracking the virus now, seeing as we know it stays alive on certain surfaces for up to 9 days. We know that in best case scenarios, it only stays alive for 3 days on certain surfaces. But the US has done the most it can so far in testing people. So we're trying to be pretty transparent about our numbers here. We have a whopping 300,000 cases confirmed. 280 a day. And I really do believe that slowing the spread of the virus has only come from people not going out and all stores shutting down and things like that. Only essential businesses remain. We took a long time to reach that step. I don't know why. But Trump really did not want to shut down the economy. He knows that this is going to hurt his election. Then in Spain, we have trailing at about 50%, but we know that they're healthcare system is completely being torn apart, just as well as Italy is. They're both small countries. They're both doing their very best they can to try and test people, but still not having the resources to test as many people who are possibly actually sick with the contagion. We have a whopping 15,000 deaths and only reported in Italy, over 15,000 deaths. That's just the people that made it into the hospital with confirmed cases dying. They're not counting the people who are at home, bedridden, sick, dying at home. Germany. I don't know what we can say about this here, but they're probably not putting in as much information as the world needs to know about the things going on in their country. I really don't believe this number. I really believe it's a lot higher. In Italy, they actually could be slowing down, maybe flattening the curve just a little bit, but that's if people were to actually stop. It might have already spread throughout Italy entirely. France, we know that they've had a terrible time with it too. I really don't believe that there's only been 1,500 deaths in Germany. Maybe it's just because there could be smarter people in Germany. Could be people that are actually staying home. Could have been people that actually follow the news, take precautions. In fact, actually, yeah, let's give Germany some credit. They're probably not too transparent, but they're probably not as bad as China really is. Now let's look at China's numbers in specific. China, they're not offering us any good information at all. And in fact, this right here is a total lie. There's no way that there's only 3,000 deaths in China's whole country. Why would they only have 3,000 deaths and 30 new cases? They're not going to tell you how many people they tested. They're not going to tell you how many people have actually recovered. I think that of the people that they're actually testing, these are the people that they think are going to live. These are the ones that they say, oh, well, you have COVID-19, but you have a chance of survival, so we're going to record you down. Because these numbers, they just don't add up. This minus this equals total people recovered. Total horseshit. Total horseshit. Because if we only have 14,000 people recovered in the US out of the 300,000 that we have confirmed so far, there's no way in God's name that these numbers are adding up. Out of 82,000, 76,000 recover already over a 180 day period. Shame on China for trying to save face, for not telling the truth, for not giving it to us straight, for blaming the US, saying that this was a bioterroristic attack from us to them. Why are you covering up your numbers then? Why wouldn't you tell us the truth if you thought this was a bioterroristic threat or attack? We talked about the Chinese covering this up. We talked about them urging the rest of the world not to panic. We talked about the stats and them lying. We talked about how places where testing is being done is not done accurately enough because there's not enough testing. There's not enough tests worldwide. We're never going to be able to track this virus at this point unless everybody on the planet gets a test and it's made efficiently, quickly, distributed quickly. If you're sick, don't leave. Don't leave your house. Have somebody else go shopping for you. Don't make contact with that person who goes shopping for you. And make sure that person doesn't get sick. Take care of your community. Now let's talk about something incredibly disturbing. I cannot find the video for the truck driver who drives urns from Hubei province and delivers them, but a truck driver in Hubei province delivering urns for the community drives urns like this on a truck. And here in this photo we have up to 20 this way, 5 and 5, which gives us a total of, let's get our calculator out. Let's get our calculator. Let's do the volume of one of these boxes in urns. This devastating looking amount of urns. 20 times 5 times 5. 500 urns. It's about 2,000 urns right here. There's more over here. About 2,000. Just in this corner of the room. The truck driver claims that he was delivering 2,500 urns a day. Now let's say they've been delivering 2,500 urns of people's ashes already filled since January 1st. We take those 120 days times 2,500. We could be looking at the real numbers of China's actual death toll. Let's say it's 300,000 people have already died. People that have been said to have had pre-existing conditions are not counted as people killed by coronavirus. But that's not true. Coronavirus made their pre-existing conditions worse and killed them. Coronavirus cases where people have had, where they've been elderly, they're not counting the elderly because they're saying it's natural causes. They're saying that something else is the cause of the death of people who are getting COVID-19 and dying in China. Their numbers aren't adding up. And why? Because they're simply not able to actually count them anymore. They have already fucked up. They don't want to say what they have or haven't done because they know they're in the wrong. They know that they took too long to tell the world about it and they're at fault. They tried to blame the US. But this is where the law of you smelt it, you dealt it rule really comes into play, where they tried to blame us. But truthfully, this was a biochemical weapon they were trying to not have get out. They were trying to not have word get out. They were trying to silence people in their own country from letting word and things get out. They just couldn't stop it. So, what does this mean for the rest of the world? If we're looking at 300,000 deaths so far, 150,000 to 300,000 deaths in China so far, how many deaths is the world actually really going to see? Let's say that in the next 180 days, China's death toll reaches, and it's real death toll, not as bullshit death toll that they're not recording or sending out information to the rest of the world. Let's say it reaches 1 million. Well, let's look at China's population. 1.3 billion. Divided by 1 point. Yeah, it's not going to work. 0.3 billion. Now, this is ugly. I'm going to take this. Now, I wonder why everything comes up in China like this. So, let's do and think about this in percents. This is 0%, right? This is looking up to being a fraction, a 1/10 of a percent of China's whole entire population. Right? Now, what does that mean for the US? We've got 330 million people. 330,000 million. 330 million people. Now let's take 0.001, which would be about the fraction of the percent that people who will actually get the virus, times the population of the United States. If the death rate, and my math is correct, the amount of people that we will see die within the next year in the United States, 0.1%, we might see up to at least 300,000 deaths. It's a shame that they're talking about this being a weapon sent from the US to China. If the US really meant for this to be a weapon, wouldn't we close off our borders the moment we shipped it out? Wouldn't we have had some sort of inside information that said, we're going to use this as a weapon against China? No, China doesn't think like that. China is a communist country that's been working on evil things for years. It was evil that they had told their healthcare professionals, you will be isolated or you will be silenced if you try to get word out about this. That is evil. That is not with good intentions. So what does this mean for the rest of the world? It means that we're going to see more deaths, less truth, and unfortunately for our healthcare providers, we're going to see a lot of struggle, a lot of tears. A lot of them are going to get infected and die. My sister's a healthcare professional, and she told me about the terror in her boss's voices when they spoke about there not being enough personal protection equipment scattered out across the US. There has not been enough time. We did not prepare well enough. China is the real threat. What does this mean for China? Well, nobody trusts them anymore. Nobody trusts what China's going to say because they're always telling fibs. We call this a fib. Saying they're shipping out 2,500 urns a day and they're going to have 40,000 shipped over the next couple of weeks. because they know people are dying and they do not want to tell the world because it'd make them look bad. The virus came from them. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone in China and Chinese people are bad or liars. Their government's lying. It's not Chinese people's fault. There are white people, there are black people in China. Proud Chinese people of American ethnicity in China. I mean, America doesn't have an ethnicity, but with American roots, people who were born in America that became citizens of China, people who were born in China from American parents. Those people are proud. Those people are not to be the ones to blame. But the government officials and those who manipulated the virus are to blame. So, should we trust information coming out of China? Absolutely not. None of it's real. None of it's accurate. Is this a setup? It could totally be a possibility at this point. We're trying to avoid thinking that while we're handling the virus because it only makes things more complicated. But truthfully, as somebody who's followed the virus ever since day one, this was 100% a setup by the Chinese government. They didn't want anybody to know. And they didn't want anybody to speak on it. Now, there are obvious things to prevent the spread. Don't go touching things. Don't go touching your face. Wash your hands with soap for at least 30 seconds. And we talked about this. Thousands of urns being shipped to Wuhan, where the virus is supposedly under control. We know it's not under control. They kicked out American reporters shortly after announcing that Wuhan had dropped to zero, presumably the choke-off flow of inaccurate information, true state of the spread. So are they telling the truth? Probably not, because there's just a lot more going on. See, I talked about this. One photo published showing a 2,500 urns arriving at the mortuary. He had delivered the same amount the day before. This is what I was talking about. Another photo shows more than their real death rate, which they say is 3,320, but 3,500 in just one photo. Just one photo. 40,000 urns are being distributed over the city in the next 10 days. They're lying about their numbers. They lied to us about the spread of the virus. They're trying to lie to us about who started it. Now, what America needs to do is we need to not believe anything that China says. We need to take our own information, which is transparent, and run with it. And then once we are able to slow down and flatten the curve, we need to find out who started it. We need to find the truth. Because the moral of the story is if we can globally convict the Chinese government and convict those who were really modifying a virus, should we put them to death? You could let us know down in the comments give this video a like, subscribe to us. I will have all the links in the descriptions where you can read these articles yourself, except for the video at the beginning, which I will play one more time for you guys to find it. We're just going to go over this one moment just one more time. Thank you for watching, and please stay
Why
safe.
do you keep calling this the Chinese virus? There are reports of dozens of incidents of bias against Chinese Americans in this country. Your own aide, Secretary Azar, says he does not use this term. He says ethnicity does not cause the virus. Why do you keep using this? A lot
Because
of
it
people
comes
say
from
it's
China.
racist.
It's not racist at all, no, not at all. It comes from China. That's why. It comes from China. I want to be accurate.
About Chinese
Yeah,
Americans
please,
in
John,
this country?
please.
The aides behind you. Are you
I
comfortable
have
with this term?
I have great love for all of the people from our country, but as you know, China tried to say at one point, maybe they stopped now, that it was caused by American soldiers. That can't happen. It's not going to happen. Not as long as I'm president. It comes from China.
The iteration comes from China. Thank you all. Help the spread of this video, stop the spread of the virus, and stay safe. Stay truthful. Stay transparent.